there's a moment that burns itself into your memory. The moment someone took something from you that you can't get back. A lie that rewired your trust. A betrayal that cracked the foundation you stood on. A silence that felt louder than any scream. And after the wreckage, when you're standing there trying to breathe through the dust, the world comes whispering the same script. You have to forgive them to be free. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes forgiveness feels like salt on a wound that hasn't closed. Sometimes it's not liberation, it's pressure. Pressure to rise before you've even found your footing. Pressure to smile while your heart is still bleeding. They call forgiveness noble. They call it strength. But no one talks about the exhaustion that comes from trying to be the bigger person when you're still learning how to be a person again at all. Maybe you've tried to forgive before. Maybe you told yourself, I'll let it go. But every time you saw their face or heard their name, your chest tightened like it never left. That's not weakness. That's your soul saying, I'm not ready to pretend this didn't matter. Forgiveness is not always the cure. It can also be another mask, another performance, another way to betray yourself in the name of peace, because sometimes pretending to forgive becomes the very thing that keeps you chained to the hurt. You don't have to forgive everyone. You don't have to absolve those who made peace impossible. You don't have to bless the hands that pushed you off the edge. There is a power in silence, a power in walking away, a power in saying, no, you don't get to rewrite the story. Because forgiveness isn't always healing. It can also be surrender. And there are moments in life where refusing to forgive is the first step toward reclaiming your dignity. You don't owe anyone your grace, especially not the ones who made you bleed for it. From the moment we're young, we're taught that forgiveness is a virtue, that it's what good people do, that the higher road always requires a softer heart. But what if that's only half the truth? What if forgiveness, when forced, is just another form of self-abandonment? What if it's a moral costume society uses to make pain more comfortable for everyone, except the one who's been hurt? People say, if you don't forgive, you're holding on to hate. No. Sometimes you're holding on to truth. The truth that someone crossed a line and doesn't deserve access to the version of you that once trusted them. Forgiveness has been glorified as the spiritual finish line, but that's a lie. Healing isn't about becoming saintly. It's about becoming real. And sometimes being real means saying, I'm not ready. I may never be. And that's okay. Because there's a kind of peace that doesn't need forgiveness. It's the peace that comes from clarity, from finally understanding who people are, and no longer fighting to change them. You can release the pain without releasing the accountability. You can move forward without excusing what was done. Forgiveness doesn't automatically make you noble. Sometimes it just makes you numb. Stop trying to moralize your emotions. You are not less evolved for feeling anger. You are not less spiritual for setting boundaries. You are human. And being human means honoring every stage of your truth, even the ones that don't fit into society's script. Some wounds are teachers, not tests. They're not meant to be forgiven. They're meant to awaken you. They're meant to burn away your illusions, to make you see clearly who deserves a seat in your life and who doesn't. So don't let anyone guilt you into grace. Don't let them rush your healing just because your discomfort makes them uneasy. Forgiveness is a choice, not a moral debt. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose yourself instead. Let it go. 2 words that sound so simple, so clean, but they're often thrown like weapons at people who are still bleeding. Everyone wants you to move on, quickly. They want the discomfort gone, the story tied up neatly with forgiveness as the bow. Because your pain makes them uncomfortable. Your silence reminds them how fragile trust really is. So they rush you. They label your grief as bitterness, your boundaries as resentment, your honesty as drama. But healing isn't a race. It's not something you can fast forward through with a few deep breaths and a motivational quote. Moving on doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means refusing to let it define who you become. You can move on without forgiving. You can let go without reconciling. You can rebuild without pretending the wreckage didn't exist. Forgiveness isn't the only doorway to freedom. Acceptance is. Acceptance that what happened, happened. That the apology you wanted may never come. That closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. And maybe that's what real maturity looks like. Not smiling through pain, but facing it. Not rushing to forgive, but learning to understand what the pain was trying to teach you. People will tell you that if you don't forgive, you're still trapped in the past. But sometimes, the only thing that keeps you trapped is the belief that you have to. That you owe grace to the very hands that broke you. No. You don't owe forgiveness to anyone who treated you like you were disposable. You don't owe peace to those who never offered it in return. And you definitely don't owe closure to someone who walked away without giving any. Moving on isn't about pretending the fire never happened. It's about walking out of the ashes without letting the smoke follow you. It's about standing tall in the understanding that some people will never feel sorry. And that's their burden to carry, not yours. So when they tell you to move on, remember this. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just learning to heal at your own pace. And that, right there, is strength. When you stop forgiving out of guilt, something inside you begins to awaken. A voice that was buried under years of people-pleasing and moral conditioning starts to whisper again. Quiet at first, then louder. What about me? You start realizing that your compassion has limits, that your empathy doesn't have to come at the expense of your sanity, that constantly turning the other cheek only leaves you dizzy. This is the moment when your healing shifts, from trying to fix others to finally protecting yourself. You stop seeking closure from the same hands that caused the wound. You stop begging for peace in places that only ever offered chaos. And that's when self-loyalty is born. Not the soft kind that quotes affirmations in the mirror, but the fierce kind. The kind that walks away mid-sentence when someone starts gaslighting you. The kind that blocks numbers without guilt. The kind that refuses to reopen doors just because someone suddenly misses the warmth they once took for granted. You begin to see forgiveness for what it sometimes is. A luxury reserved for the truly remorseful. And not everyone is. Some people need to live with the silence of your absence. They need to sit in the discomfort of your boundaries. That silence, that distance, that's your power echoing. This stage of your life isn't about revenge. It's about redirection. It's about taking all the energy you used to spend fixing broken people and using it to rebuild yourself, to rediscover your standards, to honor your worth, not in words, but in choices. You learn that loving yourself isn't selfish. It's strategic. It's how you make sure you never end up back in the same place that required healing in the first place. Because self-loyalty means this. You choose peace, even when forgiveness isn't possible. You choose distance, even when love still lingers. You choose you, even when the world calls it cold. And that's not cruelty, that's evolution. That's what it means to finally stop betraying yourself in the name of being good. This is your rebirth. Not into someone softer, but into someone stronger. Someone who no longer chases peace through people who thrive on chaos. Someone who doesn't need to forgive to be free. Because now, your freedom comes from loyalty to the one person who always deserved it from the start. You. Because now you understand that peace isn't a prize someone else can hand you. It's something you build, brick by brick, once you stop waiting for an apology that will never come. Forgiveness isn't the key to freedom. Letting go is. And letting go doesn't mean letting them off the hook. It means you stop dragging their shadow across every sunrise that still belongs to you. You start realizing that the past no longer deserves front row seats to your present. That healing doesn't mean reopening the wound just to prove you're over it. It means sealing it shut, honoring the scar, and walking on, untouched by guilt. Because freedom isn't about reconciliation. It's about indifference. When their name no longer burns. When your chest no longer tightens, when you can think of what happened and feel nothing. That's power, that's peace. You rise, not because you've forgiven them, but because you've outgrown them. You no longer carry the need to explain, to justify, to fix. You rise because your energy now belongs to your future, not your pain. Some people never deserve a second chance. And that's not bitterness. It's balance. The universe doesn't demand you to forgive what broke you. It only asks that you don't let it break you twice. You can't control what they did, but you can control what you do next. You can rebuild your faith, not in them, but in yourself. You can redefine strength, not as swallowing the pain, but as refusing to let it define you. You rise by accepting that forgiveness is not the destination. Peace is. And sometimes, peace means walking away forever, with your head high and your heart finally light. So when the world tells you to forgive and forget, you can smile and say, "No, I remember, and I'm still free." Because true freedom doesn't come from forgiving the past. It comes from refusing to live there. They told you forgiveness was freedom. They told you it would make you lighter, happier, healed. But what they never told you, what they never warned you about, was the cost. Because every time you forgive someone who hasn't changed, a piece of you pays the price. Every time you silence your pain just to keep the peace, you teach people that your pain doesn't matter. And the truth is, forced forgiveness doesn't set you free. It just buries your anger alive. You start shrinking yourself to seem understanding. You start downplaying your wounds to look strong. And before you know it, you're performing forgiveness like a role you never auditioned for. Smiling through the ache. Calling it growth when it's really surrender. Forgiveness that comes too soon is self-betrayal dressed in virtue. It teaches others that they can hurt you, walk away, and still be welcomed back to the warmth of your heart. And maybe that's why you feel empty even after saying, "I forgive you." Because deep down, you know they never earned it. There's a hidden grief in forgiving someone who's unrepentant. You grieve the version of yourself that kept believing they'd change. You grieve the time you'll never get back, the apologies that never came, the moments that could have been honest, but weren't. That grief is heavy. It lingers because you keep trying to heal with people who keep reopening the wound. Forgiveness, when misplaced, becomes poison. It blurs the lines between compassion and compliance, between grace and gullibility. And one day, you wake up realizing you didn't forgive for you. You forgave for them. You did it to seem kind, to seem evolved, to prove to the world that you weren't bitter. But bitterness isn't the problem. The real danger is pretending to be at peace when you're still at war inside. You don't owe anyone your mercy, especially when they've made a habit of mistaking your kindness for weakness. You don't owe anyone access to the healed version of you when they were the reason you broke in the first place. Forgiveness should never cost you your boundaries. It should never cost you your self-respect. And if it does, then it isn't forgiveness. It's sacrifice. So stop apologizing for protecting your heart. Stop confusing forgiveness with freedom. Sometimes the real liberation comes not from saying, "I forgive you," but from finally saying, "Never again." We grow up believing that closure is the final chapter, that one last conversation will tie up the loose ends, clear the air, make the pain make sense. But life doesn't always give you that luxury. Sometimes the door stays open, the apology never comes, and the story ends mid-sentence. And that's when you face one of the hardest truths of all. You might never get closure from the person who broke you. You might have to write it yourself, because closure isn't something they give you. It's something you create the moment you stop waiting for them to explain why they hurt you. The moment you realize that understanding their reasons won't make the pain any smaller. That knowing why won't undo what happened. There's a dangerous illusion in waiting for closure. It keeps you tethered to the past. You start replaying every memory, dissecting every word, hoping the puzzle will solve itself. But the truth is, some people leave because it's easy. Some people hurt you because it's convenient. And no amount of overthinking will make it right. Letting go without closure is brutal. It feels unnatural. It feels unfair. Because every part of you wants justice, wants acknowledgement, wants answers. But peace doesn't come from answers. It comes from acceptance. Acceptance that not everyone is capable of honesty. Acceptance that silence is a form of truth. Acceptance that some people will never meet you at the depth you reached for them. And that's okay, because closure isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about walking away before it breaks you next. When you finally stop waiting, you reclaim your time, your power, your direction. You stop giving energy to the person who couldn't see your worth. You stop rewriting endings that were never yours to finish. Letting go without closure is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's realizing that your healing is no longer a negotiation. It's a decision. So, no, you might never get the apology. You might never hear the explanation. But one day, you'll wake up, and their name won't sting anymore. Their absence won't echo. Their memory will just fade into quiet. Their memory will just fade into quiet. And in that quiet, you'll realize you didn't need closure. You just needed you. There comes a point when words lose their power. When explanations, arguments, and emotional pleas stop meaning anything. Because you finally realize some people aren't listening to understand. They're listening to defend. And the most powerful thing you can do is stop talking. Silence is not weakness. It's not retreat. It's strategy. It's what happens when your peace becomes more important than your point. You learn that you don't have to prove you were right. You don't have to justify your pain. You don't have to convince anyone that what they did was wrong. Because deep down, they already know. They just don't care enough to admit it. So you go quiet. Not because you've given up, but because you've finally reclaimed your energy. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop reopening your heart to people who only come to see if it's still bleeding. That's when your silence starts to speak louder than your words ever could. It says, "I've said enough." It says, "You no longer have access to me." It says, "I'm not here to fight for closure. I'm here to protect my peace." Silence is your final boundary. It's the invisible wall between who you were and who you've become. It's the space where healing finally begins to breathe. You start to notice the calm. The stillness that once scared you now feels sacred. You realize that silence doesn't mean emptiness. It means alignment. You are no longer feeding chaos with reaction. You are no longer giving your energy to noise. And ironically, that's when they start to notice. When you stop chasing, they start remembering. When you stop talking, they start listening. But by then, it's too late. Because your silence has already spoken the truth they tried to drown out. You don't need them anymore. Silence is the sound of self-respect. It's the anthem of a soul that finally knows its worth. And once you taste that level of peace, you'll never beg to be understood again. Because sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make is no statement at all. Strength has always been misunderstood. People think it's about endurance. How much pain you can take, how long you can tolerate disrespect, how quiet you can stay while you're breaking inside. But real strength, it's not endurance, it's evolution. True strength isn't measured by how well you can forgive. It's measured by how deeply you can transform after you stop. The world tells you that strong people never give up on others. But the truth is, sometimes strength is walking away before you lose yourself completely. Sometimes it's deleting the number, not sending the message, not reopening the wound. Sometimes it's looking at the door that once led to love and choosing not to knock again. Because strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's quiet. It's steady. It's the kind of power that doesn't demand recognition. It simply is. Strength is choosing peace over performance. It's standing firm in your decision, even when guilt tries to drag you back. It's understanding that self-respect will always cost you something, but never as much as self-betrayal. You used to think strength was staying. Now you know it's leaving. You used to think strength was forgiving. Now you know it's releasing. You used to think strength was softening. Now you know it's protecting. You are not cold for choosing distance. You are not bitter for building walls. You are rebuilding yourself brick by brick, boundary by boundary, moment by moment. And each act of self-respect is another declaration of power. The old version of you fought to be understood. The new version of you no longer explains. Because true strength doesn't beg to be seen. It radiates. It stands quietly in the aftermath, unshaken, untamed, and unapologetically free. Strength isn't about forgiving what broke you. It's about refusing to let it define you. It's about rising. Not because you forgot, but because you remembered who you are.